others crashed before they got off the launch pad. None of the press conferences went as expected. There were a few big no-shows and a major steal by Microsoft. So ultimately, what did this E3 mean for gaming as a whole? Well, we're about to go head-to-head to find out.
Notice they waited till they got, or the next week they got home.
Gamers were treated to the most unusual E3 in a long time. With no hardware news to be had, this year was all about the game.
The Wii Motion
many
Plus?
fans by not announcing new games for Zelda, Mario, or Kid Icarus. Instead, focusing on casual, family-friendly fare like Wii Music and Wii Sports Resort. Microsoft stunned the crowd by snagging Final Fantasy 13, but many were upset to learn that Bungie's new Halo game had been yanked from the show at the last minute. Sony fans are still wondering where's PlayStation Home, and if Little Big Planet will move systems this fall. Joining us today from San Francisco, the Vice President of Games Content for IGN, Tal Blevins. Great to have you back on.
Cool.
Howdy, Adam. And also joining us today from New York, editor of MTV's multiplayer blog, Stephen Totillo. Thanks for dropping by, Stephen.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
All right, well, Tal, let's just start off with
MTV.
E3 in general. Obviously, John Riccitiello and Dave Perry are quite grumpy about how sort of the entire thing was, that was so small. Do you think that there's some merit? Do you think something's going to happen?
I think something has to happen, Adam. I don't think, the show as it is now is really serving anybody. It's not good for the publishers. They're not getting the buzz that they really want to get out of the show. It's not really good for the journalists or the reporters who cover the show because they're really not seeing anything new. And it's not good for the industry as a whole because there's nothing really to draw the mainstream media or really get the word out there about what the video game industry does.
Stephen, is this your take on E3? Is it in danger?
I have to respectfully disagree with Tal. First of all, so working for MTV, I guess I'm partially the mainstream media, and we went to E3, so they're still getting those outlets in, and I saw reporters from a lot of other major outlets there. And what I look to E3 for is, regardless of all the hype that may have happened before earlier in the year, what you want out of an E3 is a sense of what is the gaming industry presenting for the rest of the year. E3 is in July these days. It used to not be, and so we used to get to see, what was going to happen May through the holidays. E3's in July, we get to see July through December games, and when I walked the E3 show floor and went to all the meeting rooms, I felt like I saw everything the gaming industry had, well, except for Activision, but they had their own satellite event, so I think it served the purpose. It showed us what we're going to be playing.
Tal, of sort of the big three, Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft, if any of them did make an impact, who do you think made the most?
I don't really think with their press conference they really made an impact this year. I think we saw, Microsoft's really trying to ride out the coattails of what Sony had going with home as well as what Nintendo has going with the Mii's, right? Microsoft invented avatars now, right? I think they're really focusing on the mainstream stuff. Sony had a little bit of excitement with God of War 3, but we kind of knew that was coming. Nintendo was just kind of boring. Everybody was kind of wondering, why is this a forum at E3? Like, why are they really focusing on the things they are at E3? This is supposed to be a hardcore gaming show. This isn't supposed to be kind of really for the casual gamers.
Stephen, Nintendo, I think, shocked all of us with its, like, a lot of
I thought
nothing.
it was distributors, like it's for the stores that sell the game.
Realizing that, what was behind their kind of, like, nothing exciting press conference?
Well, I think Tal's last two answers kind of underscore some of the confusion that's with, that kind of surrounds E3, kind of what kind of show is it and who is it really for? Because, Tal, you were talking about how E3 should be a show that draws the mainstream media, but then you were just saying that Nintendo's press conference should be tailored towards the hardcore. So I think Nintendo would be right to ask, well, which is it, and who should we be appealing to? And I think Nintendo definitely had the weakest of the press conferences, and I think the main reason for that is simply they showed the least amount of stuff. They've become really stingy in terms of what they reveal, and so there were only a few games announced, and it made it much easier to walk away disappointed just if you didn't happen to be impressed with Shaun White snowboarding on the Wii, or some other games. Whereas Microsoft and Sony were very impressive in just how exhaustive they were, how many ideas they had. So even if the avatars seemed lame to somebody, Netflix might have seemed cool. And of course, Microsoft's was the most fun to be at because it's, it doesn't really mean anything ultimately, I think, but there's always that sport of seeing who's going to insult who, and they certainly had the best insult to throw at the other companies with their reveal of Final Fantasy 15 coming to 360.
That's the whole point of E3, just insult each other.
Final Fantasy 13 going multi-platform. I mean, is this really a blow to Sony, or is this just a benefit for Square?
Well, I do think it's kind of a blow to Sony, but it's obviously also a benefit to Square. I mean, I think it just kind of underscores that game development now is so expensive that you kind of have to go multi-platform to be able to sell enough copies to be able to recoup your costs. And also, it kind of shows that Microsoft really wants to boost that Japanese market, and that's one way to really do it is with Square, right?
Now, Steven, one of the things, I wasn't terribly excited about Final Fantasy 13 because I'm just not a fan of the series, but I was expecting to hear something about Bungie, which it sounds like they pulled at the last moment. Was that a wise decision? And do you have any better insight as to what motivated that?
Right, well, I had the opportunity to interview Don Matrick, who's basically the head of all Xbox business for Microsoft, and we were able to break the news that, in fact, the announcement that Bungie wanted to make was, in fact, a Halo project being done, with Microsoft. He told me that in an interview. I pressed him for more details, and he clammed up pretty quickly. And I think that would have made a big deal. I'm not really clear on why Microsoft decided not to include that. What Don Matrick told me and told some other reporters was that they simply felt they had enough to talk about. But I think that would have helped, show where the Halo franchise is going. And overall, we didn't get any Halo out of this E3. Matrick told me that's in part because there'll be a more Halo-centric event or some sort of series of news announcements coming later in the year. And so maybe that's where Halo Wars will be more properly showcased, and maybe we'll find more about this Bungie project, Peter Jackson, and what have you. But for Halo fans, E3 was obviously a wash. There was nothing for them.
Now, Tal, some of the games that we kind of knew about or actually had no idea about were MAG and God of War 3. They were all coming from Sony. How far along do you think these games are? And do you think Sony's once again making promises they can't deliver on in an expedient time?
Well, I think we're going to wait until at least holiday season of next year until we really see anything formidable on these games. We just kind of saw trailers, and we kind of knew, these were coming as well. Again, not huge, big surprises. But I think we're still going to be a long ways until we actually see some real gameplay and really what these games are all about.
All right.
Yeah, and I think that helps. I think that helps Sony because I think people get burnt out if they see gameplay too early on. But if you're just showing somebody trailers, then there still is that first gameplay reveal. It's going to be coming later. I don't
know. I think people would have loved to have seen gameplay of God of War 3.
But don't you think they would have gotten tired then if they had to milk that for so long?
Yeah.
God of War 3. God of War 3. Anyway, Steven, Tal, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for joining us. And now, let's go over to Kristen.
Thanks, Adam. We have to take a quick break, but first, tell us what you think with today's Xbox.
Because what I'm noticing, or what I'm thinking is that, what is this?
No PS3 price drop. Cast your vote at our website, g4tv.com/xplay, and we'll have the results later in the show.
But what I'm thinking is that at E3, and part of game development, and like they mentioned, it's so expensive. I think what's happening is that because the technology is basically jumping by leaps and bounds. Last year, the complaint that it's all first-person shooters and they're all static. It's all World War II. And it's kind of the same last year. So that's why games like Halo and Gears of War stood out. Because they broke the mold of either modern day or World War II historical type action. So and then on top of that, you just see so much innovation in terms of what's going on in the game development. So I'm thinking what's happening is that companies they throw out the feelers, they throw out some information, they show people this and that, and they really are looking for that feedback because they want to know, okay, what are people thinking? What are people picking up on? What do they like? Because so they're throwing out one gimmick, get the feedback, and they say, oh well, it's no release date to be announced. Yeah, because they want people to play the demo, mess around with it, listen to what they're saying, and then say, okay, so what do we need to add? What do we need to add? So I don't know. That's just one idea I think is kind of going on. I mean, it kind of makes sense when you think about like, okay, so much money going into these these projects, and they have to make something that sells because it's just not worth it otherwise. So, but yeah, you use an E3 to just sample the public.